Hello, this is Raymond Perrier, the director of the Denis Hurley Centre, speaking to you from the very heart of Durban, indeed the soul of Durban, sandwiched between Emmanuel Cathedral and the Grey Street Mosque, in a place where people have been praying in Durban for 150 years. It's my great privilege to share with you some thoughts on St. Joseph, and in particular the theme of St. Joseph the Worker. And I'm starting here outside the Denis Hurley Centre, where we're about to start serving food for homeless guys. As many of you know, we serve food to homeless people 5 days a week. In fact, we served 170,000 meals to the homeless last year, right the way through the lockdown. It might seem a strange place to start talking about Joseph the Worker, because perhaps we think of the homeless as the very opposite of workers. But interestingly, a few years ago when we did a survey with the Human Science Research Council about homeless people living on the streets of Durban, we asked them what it was that would get them off the streets. Was it money? Was it drug rehab? Was it accommodation? And 72% of people said that what they wanted was work. What they wanted was the chance to earn their own money, to have the dignity of working, to have the opportunity to look after themselves. And so while we serve food for people in the absence of them being able to find work, we are conscious that it's work and the dignity of work that the homeless most seek, as we all seek. And that's something Pope Francis reminds us of when he's reflecting on Joseph the Worker. He talks about the dignity of work. He talks about the purpose that work gives us. He talks about the self-esteem that work gives us. And it's important to bear in mind that those who are deprived of that, often through no fault of their own, because of the economic situation, or because they haven't had the same educational or economic opportunities as other people, are not one people we should look down on, are not people we should despise because they're not working, but rather think, how can we give them access to work? That's why, as well as feeding people and providing healthcare, and giving access to showers and clean clothes, we also are constantly looking for ways of enabling people who are on the streets to get into work. Probably one of the best examples of that, our project of homeless men selling second-hand books on the streets of Durban. Indeed, they were selling outside St. Joseph's for a while. And you've seen that yourself in your own community, as homeless guys have been brought into your community to work as car guards, newspaper sellers, booksellers, and to see the transformation in them that achieves. I remember when we had our newspaper selling project, one of the guys who was actually selling outside Fatima Church said something very interesting. He said, since I've started selling newspapers, I don't make any more money than I used to when I was begging at these robots, but now I'm treated differently. People stop their cars, they wind down their windows, and they talk to me. They treat me as a fellow human being. And even if they don't buy a newspaper from me, even if I don't make money, I realize that I have changed in their eyes. So the first thing I would ask you to do in reflecting on St. Joseph the Worker is let's not be too proud, let's not be too arrogant to look down on those who for whatever reason are unable to work. Let's still see in them the potential for work, the potential for transformation, the potential to join in God's great act of co-creation. I've now moved into our kitchen where Tracy, Zama and Michael are behind me, are busy serving food ready to hand out to the homeless. And that's because I want to continue this theme of the role of work as co-creation. It's a beautiful phrase which appears in the documents of the Second Vatican Council, and Pope Francis uses it again in his document about the year of St. Joseph. God the Father is the creator, the source of all that is in our universe, and yet we are called as children of God to be co-creators, to join in that act of creation, and work is one of the ways in which we do so. And importantly, that's true of any kind of work. There isn't a hierarchy of work. Sadly, in our society, some jobs are seen as being more important or more valuable than other jobs. And some jobs, of course, are infinitely better paid than other jobs. But the principle of co-creation stresses that all work, if done well, is of value. It's of value to society, it's of value to creation, and it's of value to God. One of our winners of the Barry Wood Outstanding Service Award this year is one of our cleaners here, Tundi Madloze. And she said very powerfully how important it is for her to do her job properly, because she knows that if the building is clean, then everyone else can do their jobs well. The nurses, the accountants, the trainers, the managers. She didn't see her job as any less valuable than theirs. So I ask you, in looking at your own work, in looking at the work of those around you, looking at the work of those who work for you or work alongside you, let's not fall into the trap that capitalist society gives us to value some work as greater than others. Instead, we need to keep asking ourselves, how do I join in the co-creative acts of God? After all, St. Joseph himself, our model of the worker, was a carpenter, certainly not an exalted profession. St. Peter, a fisherman. St. Paul, a tent maker. And even St. Matthew, who had probably the most middle class of jobs as a tax collector, was actually despised for being a tax collector. The nearest equivalent today might be perhaps a traffic cop. But any job done well, done with integrity, done with honesty, is a chance to serve God and to serve our fellow human being. And that's true of jobs that are well paid, of jobs that are poorly paid, and jobs that we do as volunteers, because they're all acts of co-creation. Thank you to so many of you at St. Joseph's who have been here into this very kitchen to volunteer. Young people, particularly the confirmation classes over the last few years, and older people, although many of you have had to shield over the last few months because of COVID. Whatever it is you're doing, keep asking yourself, how can I use my energies and use my skills and use my talents to engage in the act of co-creation with God and with St. Joseph, the patron of workers. The last stop on this very short tour of the Denis Hurley Centre finds me here in front of the statue of Archbishop Hurley. He's holding the books of the Second Vatican Council. Those books talk about the role of us as workers, indeed of all lay people, as being leaven in the bread. That is an opportunity to transform the dough around us by the way that we live and by our lives. And that's why my last reflection in the context of being workers is to think about the scourge of corruption in our society. Corruption, sadly, is endemic in South Africa. It would be very reassuring if we thought that corruption is always something perpetrated by other people, people outside of our community or outside of our church. But the reality is that Catholics, members of our own church, members even of our own parish or clergy, may be as tempted by corruption as anyone else. So the first question we must ask ourselves as we reflect during Lent is, what role do I play in corruption? So much of corruption happens in the workplace. As a worker or as somebody seeking a service, do I look for a bribe? Do I pay a bribe? Do I try to influence things so that instead of actions being taken for the common good, they favour me or they favour a particular group, and that a payment is being made to make that possible? We are often too tempted to point to the person who receives the bribe as being the one who is corrupt, but the one who gives the bribe is no less corrupt. But the second question is, what role do I have to play in speaking out when I see corruption, when I see dishonesty in the workplace? Do I just keep quiet? Am I afraid? Or do I turn a blind eye? Or do I even pat the person on the back? Or do I speak out? Because if I don't, then it's the poor who are suffering. It's those who don't get the service, don't get what they have paid for, or don't get what they deserve because somebody else is getting the benefit. And we all have a role to speak out. And thirdly, perhaps a hidden form of corruption is the way in which we might fail to really work to the extent that we are paid and to the extent that our talents enable us to. It's too tempting to just be good enough, to just do the bare minimum, to put in the hours but not necessarily put in the work, to perhaps leave early or not go the extra mile. And in so doing, we are complicit in the corruption of mediocrity, the corruption It says it doesn't really matter what we do as long as we get away with it. But as soon as we do that, we are contributing to a society that continues to spiral downwards, and where again it is the poor who most suffer. So during this period of Lent, where we're asked to reflect, and we're reflecting this week on our role as workers, let me ask you this. Think about the ways in which I might be corrupt in the way that I work or the way I treat other workers. Think about the opportunities I have to speak out against corruption, against fraud, against dishonesty. And think about whether you are really doing everything you can to use your time and to use your talents to serve those whom you are asked to serve. Because anything less than that is corruption. But to do all of those things is to transform our lives and transform our society as we are called upon to do during this period of Lent. Metanoia, turning around. Thank you so much for listening. I wish you many blessings for Lent, and may this period of fasting, of prayer and almsgiving being an opportunity for us to change our lives and change our world. Thank you. Loving God, creator of the universe, you call us to be co-creators with you, to work alongside you, using the talents, the opportunities and the energy you have given us to transform your world. We ask you to bless our work. We ask you to bless our workers. We ask you to grant the dignity of work to those who lack it, and to ensure that all who work receive fair compensation for what they do. And we ask that our work will be honest, will be full of integrity, will be full of love of you and love of the poorest of the poor. We ask this in the name of Christ our Lord, who was the son of a worker and surrounded himself with ordinary workers, and works alongside us as we seek to engage in your work in this world. Amen.